Hello, my name is Julian from QSE Dynamics, and welcome to the 5-part risk management series. Now, really the objective of this course is to be an introduction into the real key principles required to build a solid risk management framework. It's going to be a fairly short series, but actually one of the shorter ones is the one that we will get started with, which is part 1, establishing context. Now, it's something that I feel is personally very overlooked. You really have to understand your business landscape, who's involved in those stakeholders, so you can really build that solid risk management framework. So this one will be the shorter of the 5, but I think you will find that you will get quite a bit of value just from this short introductory course. So the agenda for part 1 is just broken up into 3 different areas. First, we're going to look at what does establishing context actually mean. We'll have a few examples of that one as well, just to help us frame it a bit more. Why this is so important to really understand what context is in the business. And then we're also going to have a look at how this feeds into the risk management processes once we understand business context. So what does establishing context actually mean? Well, let's first have a look at it in a very short but clear way, which is knowing what the business does and who can be directly and indirectly impacted by the activities of the business. So you can think about, well, okay, that does include employees, people who work directly within the business. But what about suppliers? What about contractors? Depending on your operational landscape, what about the community, neighboring businesses? These are all the things that need to be really well thought out before you can really understand the whole context of the business. So it's not just anyone who's directly involved, it's all these other offshoots that we have to consider. And so here's a bit of an example of the wider environment, and the types of risks as well can be their own types of categories. You do have your quality, safety, environmental. You could even add business risks, so continuity. All these things could either be combined into one risk tool, or you could have them separate depending again on your operational landscape. So have a real think about what you term as being risk, what you would like to be able to analyze, the types of activities involved. So you can see we've got a number of examples there of where you could just be thinking about those different types of business activities. Generally, you'll have more than that, of course. You'll have accounts, you'll have HR, and then think about all those stakeholders. That one is really important. It's just making sure that you have considered everyone, because it's not always the case. And that's generally where you do see the gaps in a risk management process within a workplace, is they've considered a number of aspects that could be of risk, but they haven't actually considered, well, all the people who it could apply to. Here's just another example. If it's easier to visualize it in this way, you can almost just segregate these different areas and think about the different needs, the wants and the requirements of each of these stakeholders, jot it down as a list, and then you'll be able to see exactly what you need to cover when developing your risk management tools. If you would like a bit more help in establishing your context and understanding the stakeholders involved, then feel free to download the free stakeholder analysis template. You can do that either by scanning the QR code on the screen and navigating to clause 4.2, or you can actually go to the QSE Dynamics website, navigate to the Mapper tool and find clause 4.2 there. You'll actually find a bit of information about what to consider when determining your relevant interested parties, and then at the bottom you'll have the document which you can use. So why is it so important to make sure we have this context correct? Now, I have given a few indications in the previous slides, but just so it is really clear, these are going to form the basis of your vision, your mission, your goals. So have a think about your current policies, and do they actually capture all those stakeholders that are directly or indirectly involved in your business? Do your policies actually describe and capture what the business does? And does it show or describe what those mechanisms are for driving risk management that does capture all those stakeholders? And keep in mind that your policies, they shouldn't just be sweeping statements. And that's often what we see. And that's why you hear people say, well, I'm reading this and it looks good on paper, but I can't see it in practice. It's because there is no alignment between the policy and how the larger system has been developed. So the way that we can actually achieve good alignment is really making sure that our context feeds into these policies and that we keep these policies in mind when developing the rest of the system. Now let's have a look at a few practical examples of this. Now we will start with a good policy, which I have taken from the internet. So this isn't one that I've made up for the purpose of this demonstration. This has actually been taken from a highly reputable university, and we can see that the policy states that it applies to staff, students, visitors, contractors. So that is great. They obviously know who their stakeholders are. And then when it comes to the activities, they're basically saying those stakeholders who are participating in or affected by the university's related activities. So further on in the policy, it does give a bit more of an explanation of those activities. In this example, related activities, it sounds a bit brief and, not essentially it's very vague, but certainly in the rest of the policy that's clarified. So I'll let them off the hook there. And then it says that the university is committed to providing staff, students, contractors, visitors with a healthy, safe and supportive environment. So it's a very clear commitment there, and I think that's a fairly good example of context being really well captured within a policy. On the flip side, we have a policy example which could use some modifications, in my opinion. Now, this is, again, a real policy. I've taken this from one of Australia's leading fast food chains as a bit of a hint. So let's have a bit of a look. They say that they're dedicated to the enjoyment and safety of their staff. That's great. Providing a positive work environment, also great. And then it says enables them to deliver a great customer experience. Okay, so there's nothing about customer safety or anything at this point. Do remember that it is a fast food chain, so you'll be having thousands of people coming onto their premises daily. They are committed to training their workers to work safely. That's great. And engage people at every level. So a top-down safety culture, also good. And this is to reinforce the commitment to health and safety of their workers. So again, it's more really implying the commitment is for direct employees or staff. But then the policy at the end says that it will be available within the workplace, and it shall also be available or made available to other parties. And we have regulators and then visitors, contractors and suppliers. So we can see that there is a very strong commitment for their employees, but there's nothing that really has a mention throughout their entire policy of their commitment to visitors, contractors and suppliers. So my question here would be, well, why are you going to make it available to visitors, contractors and suppliers when you clearly haven't put your commitment down in writing? So that's a really good example of why you need to really make sure your context is right, you align it to your policy correctly, and then you feed that into the rest of your risk management processes. So just to recap on those last few slides, have a think about if your policy applies to all stakeholders which are impacted by the business, if it adequately specifies the types of activities which are included under the policy, and then also provides that solid starting point for you to build a consistent risk management framework. And again, there is a free tool available on the QSE Dynamics website. You can scan the QR code and head to clause 5.2, or just navigate there from the website. And what you will find is there is a checklist which will just run you through a whole range of questions which should be covered within your policies. And then you can actually also email a copy of it to yourself. So it's almost a bit of a mini audit, which is great if you're looking at redoing your policies or you want to establish some policies and want to make sure that you have covered everything that you need. So within this 5-part series, we will be talking more about how we are going to integrate this context, or this understanding of context, within the risk management tools of the business. Within the next few parts, we will be creating a risk analysis model, followed by implementing this risk management process. So that's all to come in the future parts. And in part 1, we have learnt, well, what does establishing context mean? Well, it means we know everyone who may be impacted by our business. Why is this so important? Well, we need to make sure that every stakeholder is captured to understand what our potential risks are. How are we going to manage risks through understanding this context? Well, we are going to use this as part of creating our risk management framework. With part 1 done, part 2 will come out in a week following this one being posted. Depending when you are watching this, it may already have been posted. So have a look under the series tab and it will show if it has indeed been posted already. In the meantime, feel free to get in touch just via my business card on the screen, or you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to have a chat, see if there's any comments or questions that I can help with. And thank you very much for your time. Cheers.